Okay. Hi, Eric.
Hi. How are you?
I'm awesome.
I'm glad to hear that, Aaron.
We're going to talk about science today.
Yeah, science. I've heard of it.
Okay. What are we talking about? What's going on?
Well, in short, it appears that things are as once they were not.
Yeah, that's true. Progress has been made.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
I haven't lived long enough to witness this
biological
myself.
progress.
Actually, that's not true. I have lived long enough. Because we can measure evolution as it's happening, right?
Yeah.
Look at urban life, right? We've seen changes in pigeons. We've seen changes in a number of animals that have to live with us.
That's right. So
as we've been alive. We're
going to cover several different ways of looking at evolution, both within the church and without the church.
Okay.
And the reason I wanted to talk about evolution is because it's such a great metric, right, as to where you kind of stand with relationship to science and the church, I think. So if you believe in evolution, right, and you're an active participating member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
yes.
For one thing, I'm proud to call you my friend. But also I think it shows, that you've been maybe paying attention, is that the right word, or maybe listening critically to the things around you. I just think that...
Or you're just young.
And maybe you're young. I just think that it's nearly impossible at this point in the history of the world to not agree that evolution is a real thing and that it is part of the world around us.
Hey, Aaron.
Right? Yeah.
Have you heard about climate change?
Yeah. I think maybe we could consider... We brought climate change up during our episode on a couple weeks ago, on the millennium, right?
We did. That's true.
Yeah. But let's...
It was a joke.
Okay.
It was a joke. I was not suggesting we talk about climate change. I was just talking about scientific consensus is maybe not.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I have gotten flack on this subject, or about
evolution
the subject
or climate change.
Well, the subject of science in general.
Science,
but certainly climate change, if not evolution itself. And it just seems so strange to me to think that there are Mormons out there who completely just reject it, right?
Well, related news, did you hear that the Ohio House has passed a bill saying you can't mark students wrong if they get a question wrong on a science test if they claim it's their religious prerogative to be wrong?
Yeah, I did see this. It doesn't make sense to me. Can you help me understand here?
No, I can't help you understand. It's wrong.
Okay.
But my point is that it's not... I mean, the stats suggest at least younger Mormons, this is less of an issue than maybe it was a couple generations ago.
Yeah.
However, I do think that we as Latter-day Saints and our intention to accept all knowledge as being part of our faith, Mormonism, as Brigham Young put it, contains all truths. And so I think we're a little less intimidated by science than maybe some evangelical groups, for instance.
Well, I do want to cover that. Let's start with some fundamentals, okay?
Fundamentals.
I'm going to start with something basic, all right?
Okay.
I believe in evolution.
Sure.
Okay? Now, I'm now going to say that statement itself is fairly crackpot, okay? Because it has the word belief in it.
Yeah.
Okay? At this point, the evidence behind the evolution of species is so strong that to even apply the word belief to it goes in the face of what Paul taught us about how faith works.
Okay, fair enough.
What did Paul teach us about how faith works?
Well, you can only have faith in something you don't know to be true.
That's right. And then as soon as you know something to be
something
faith,
else.
It's something else. Right, exactly. It becomes knowledge, right? At this point, we can not only do we know that evolution has happened, is happening, but we can measure the rate at which it's happening and make predictions.
Yes.
Right? So it's it has this unfortunate branding of the theory of evolution.
That's because science uses words differently than some other people use them.
That's right. So I think that you would find lots of Mormons that would agree with me, and I think that where people start to disagree all comes down on the particulars, which I think is what is interesting to talk about.
Okay.
So let's talk about evolution first.
I'm listening.
What's evolution?
Well, I'm not a scientist, so this may not be textbook, but evolution is the idea that as generations pass, slight variations in creatures allows those creatures with the best opportunity to succeed in the circumstances that exist to pass on their own genes and thus slowly shape the species in a direction that is more successful. It's not necessarily leading to greater complexity. It's not necessarily anything else. It's just
more of you.
There's more of you. You were successful at living and creating new of you.
Yeah. This part I don't think is the controversial part.
Oh.
Okay?
Okay.
This part, this is why I say when I talk about the word belief and fact and things like this.
Yeah.
We can go ahead and we can use specific examples of evolution that have happened even in modern times.
Yeah.
And then from there, we can just say, oh, obviously there's evolution. So the classic example of evolution is the moth, right?
Yeah, that's one you definitely learned about your freshman year of high school.
Tell me about the moth.
So this is 1800s in London town. I don't know the exact year, but we're talking 1800s, not long after Darwin publishes.
That's right. This is the peppered moth.
So this is a moth that, as natural variation, has lighter colored and darker colored members of the species. Mm-hmm. Most of the moths were lighter colors, but then, lo and behold, in London, where there's a lot of soot making everything black, a lot more of them are dark colored because they can hide more easily in the soot-colored buildings on the walls that have been coated in dirt and grime. However, now that London's a much cleaner place, they're back to being mostly light-colored moths.
That's right. So they became one thing, then they became another thing, right? What's interesting about this is that it was the coloring of the moth that changed, right?
Yes, but in some ways this is not maybe the greatest example because both those variations existed before and during and after this change we're talking about. So you could argue it's not evolution because...
Well, here's what it says on the wikis.
Okay. I'm not trying to start a fight, but...
I think it's okay to fight. Let's fight.
Yeah.
The dark-colored or melanic form of the...
Melanic, that's so scientific.
From melanin, is of the peppered moth was not known before 1811, right?
It was not known?
Yeah, that's what it says
here. Really? Okay,
yeah.
Then what I just said was wrong. I didn't know that. I thought it was a known variation before that.
No.
1911, it was that late?
1811, sorry.
Oh, 1811, okay.
1811, yeah. Right. It's been used, as you say, as an example of evolution.
It's easy to understand.
Because it's easy to understand, right? Whether or not it's the best example of evolution is interesting, but it is definitely an example. It's not my favorite example.
What is your favorite example?
Even though I might have said it was.
You can edit that out.
Antibodies.
Okay.
Are actually my favorite example of evolution because it's occurring in every one of your immune system cells.
Okay,
all the time.
but
okay, yeah,
yeah, I get that the principle is at work here. However, you're not talking about a species,
right? Well, fair enough.
So I don't think the Ohio House finds your example very compelling.
This is what we should try to be clear about. There's randomness and change within animals.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is what I mean by antibodies, right? So the idea is that your antibodies, your genes are always being cut up and reorganized and randomized so that they can react and respond to whatever they find. And so they're always being subtly shuffled around.
Chaos for chaos.
Chaos for chaos, right? And so eventually the antibody will bind to its target. It's just amazing how powerful it is. It is evolution in the terms of its random change.
Yeah, I see that the principle is the same. I'm just saying somebody who's trying to say, well, I've never seen someone born from a monkey, like they're not going to be convinced by this. But that person's not looking to be convinced.
It's called speciation, all right?
Yeah.
So it's the formation, here's the definition, the formation of new and distinct species in the course of evolution.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the idea that one species can turn into another, right, over the course of a long time.
Yeah.
And it was this is the controversial topic. And at its heart it challenges creationism in some ways because specifically about the origin of man.
Yeah, and that's I'm sure that's fair to say. I don't have a problem with that statement, but it is.
I do a bit. I don't believe it challenges.
No, I don't believe it challenges it either. But like I get that argument. I don't like somebody wants to say that, and that's how they read Genesis. I can sympathize with that.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is that this literalism that has overcome a lot of Christianity in the last few hundred years.
Yeah.
While of course literalism always existed, the scriptures were always metaphorical and interpreted, and a lot of the literalism we see today is a reaction to the theory of evolution and theories like the movement of tectonic plates, like modern geology. A lot of the literalism came from people having their worldviews shaken a little bit by science.
Yeah, I think
literalism was less popular before.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. This whole topic seems so in some ways basic, okay? But I think
is that basic in the 2019 teenager sense? Or?
I don't actually know. What I mean by that is that in my opinion, this is not controversial, right? That species evolved from other species, right? Mm-hmm. In my opinion, it's not controversial.
It's pretty settled.
Right.
I mean, you have a PhD in a biological field.
I do.
Yeah.
And so, but I know that that there's a real segment of the population of LDS folks where it's just not settled. I'm deliberately avoiding the topic of evolution of man from monkeys. Okay? I'm deliberately avoiding it because I think that's the most interesting part of the whole conversation, and I want to save it for later.
Okay.
I want to talk just about speciation first, all right? To help understand how evolution really can work, all right? So, where's the magic in evolution? What is the magic of it? Why is it possible?
I can't believe you introduced the word magic when you were trying to. What do you mean by that?
Okay.
Like, why is changing from one species to another possible?
Yeah. Because
millions of years, Aaron.
So Carl Sagan.
Okay. Oh, Carl Sagan, yeah.
Okay, Cosmos. The Secrets of Evolution.
Guessed wrong.
Yeah, that's good.
I thought you were going to say The Demon in the Freezer or whatever that book is.
Carl Sagan, Cosmos. Okay. The secrets of evolution are death and time. The deaths of an enormous numbers of life. Okay.
A lot of death.
The deaths of enormous numbers of life forms that were imperfectly adapted to their environment.
Yeah.
And time for a long succession of small mutations.
So, I do not have a PhD in the biological field.
Yeah.
I am a literature person. And literature, as I often tell my students, is all about sex and death. Beginnings and endings, creation and destruction. That's what literature is about. So I'm going to take a slight issue with Carl Sagan's phrasing, because I don't think you can say it's about death without saying it's about sex.
Yeah.
Because, certain people die, but that only matters because then they don't have sex.
That's right.
Sex is where the new people come from.
That's the randomization of it.
Right. Well, what do you mean by randomization?
That's
what
some
people
sex
die.
does.
Oh yeah, right. Sex allows us to shuffle the deck.
Once you've reproduced and had progeny,
yeah,
it literally doesn't matter what happens to you after that.
You're done.
Look at some of the species of spiders that just eat each other.
That's
right?
true. Yeah. You've done your job.
Once you've passed on that genetic material, right? Mm-hmm. But the point of this particular quote is, yes, I agree that you should talk about the whole mixing of genes that's part of this, is time. Okay?
Yeah, time's important.
And the age of the Earth,
pretty old.
Not 6,000 years.
No.
But it's really, really old, right?
Yeah.
And that amount of time allows you to really, it's just a mind-bogglingly large amount of time. And
I don't know if it's really comprehensible.
Yeah. And everything really just gets shuffled up, and you can have time to speciate. So that's the idea behind it. I know this might feel like a bit of an intro to biology course here, but we have to have these definitions and fundamentals on there before we can see how well, the evolution of evolution has happened in the church.
Sure.
And this topic of death, though, is actually where I think our church has the biggest disagreement with the science. Okay?
The topic of death?
The topic of death
Okay.
itself.
Interesting.
Okay?
I'm guessing. I have a guess where you're going, but I don't want to jump on your feet because I could be totally wrong.
Again, we're tabling for now the creation of man.
Yeah.
Okay? And the creation of men and women, I should say. All right? We're tabling for now that.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were using the Latin manus, meaning hand, and you were all about opposable thumbs.
That's
and that's
right.
where we were
The
headed this whole
creation
time.
of opposable
I didn't
thumbs.
realize you were being sexist, Aaron. It didn't even occur to me. So
It's so funny. All this reading I did for evolution, right?
Yeah.
All the literature is real old.
sure.
And it all uses this sexist terminology.
Yeah.
And darned if it doesn't stick in your head. It's just the evolution of man. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, that's not very inclusive.
The ladies had some role, I'm sure.
It is old language, but yeah, anyway. So, we're tabling that aside. Let's talk about why this part of it would conflict with some of the teachings of the church. Right?
Okay.
Because that Adam fell, we are. And by his fall came death. And we are made partakers of misery and woe.
Mm-hmm.
All right? That is from Moses 6:48. The prophet Enoch
Good old Enoch.
said that, right? And okay, listen, we're cheating a bit. The Wikipedia article on Mormons and evolution is bananas, right? It's really unfair. I don't see how you, as a teacher, can assign any homework to anybody. It's just all right there. Okay?
Well, I can because for some reason junior high school teachers tell kids that Wikipedia is a den of sin and iniquity and they need to stay away from it.
Oh, wow.
So really? I have to deprogram them.
Oh, because you teach seniors and freshmen.
Yeah,
So
and
you get to start them.
Wikipedia is good. It is a good thing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
This article is really good. It goes through the three specific first presidency statements on evolution, right?
Yes.
It talks about all statements from each of the presidents of the church. Okay.
All of them.
Well, each of them that have made statements on it, I should say, right? It talks about the manuals and all of the different things that
all the different stuff that's been said.
All the different stuff that's been said. But this one in particular has always been the one that got me. One of the ideas behind the story of, or let's be careful with our language here. We believe that there was an Adam and Eve, and there was a Garden of Eden, and there was a fall, right?
I would put that in the probable camp.
Okay, so this isn't where I thought we would be having disagreement.
I don't disagree. I think it is probably true. I just wouldn't be willing, like, if there was a wager made and God was keeping the odds secret, I would just not place a bet.
Well, I think it's interesting. We know, a lot of what we know about Adam and Eve and the fall of Garden. Wow, I didn't think we were going to go here, but this might be the most interesting thing for us to talk about, right? There's a lot of it in the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl Great Price. There's some of it in the Temple Ceremony, right? But we know about this thing that happened, right? You had the creation of Adam and Eve and the fall, and it's one of the three pillars of salvation.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, that's right. Thanks for bringing that up. Now I'm in trouble.
Well, by the fall came death.
Yeah.
Right? And by death came salvation.
Maybe the fall is just scripture code for evolution.
Maybe it is. Well, I'm not that's the thing, is that it's very hard to make that statement because that's not what the prophets have said over and over again.
So let me tell you why I'm not willing to go 100% on this.
Wait, did I make the point?
I think so. Make it again.
We can't have death before the fall of Adam and Eve. Okay? That's what this sentence says. And so...
That's extremely problematic.
Okay, yeah. But this is what it says, okay? And if you read this literally, it says, you can't have death before the fall of Adam and Eve, and because of that, you can't have evolution, right?
Yeah. Boo.
Boo. Okay, so what's going on here? Listen, when we first started this endeavor that we're going through, I told you I had these 3 great questions.
Oh, okay. Is this one of them?
This is one of them.
Oh, fun.
This is particularly, how do you reconcile this point of doctrine, that death didn't exist before Adam and Eve, and evolution? All right, that is the most interesting question.
In my normal way, I just tend to be dismissive of it.
Look, and I'm not going to tell you that I have an answer. Okay?
Yeah.
I think that with the literal reading of these scriptures, that there's an issue.
I believe I've said something about literalism already on this podcast.
Okay, go
episode.
ahead.
So here's the major problem I have, is that although I'm willing to accept that Adam and Eve are real people and that Eden was a real place, I don't have a problem with that being true. I don't think the scriptures prove that, or really even pushing it that hard. The story of the Garden of Eden as an active Latter-day Saint, the way you're most likely to bump into that, even if you're reading the Bible straight through over and over again, you're most likely to bump into it in the temple, where it is a ritual story enacted as ritual by us as participants. We are Adam, we are Eve, we fall. It seems, and I'm not an expert here, so I am talking about what other people say, and this makes sense to me, but experts who are not me have suggested that the early story of Genesis also seems like some sort of ritual story, a story that would be enacted. The version in Moses, the version in Abraham, I still feel that way. I mean, even though the Abraham thing does not seem very closely connected to the papyrus that it came from, those are ritualistic.
Well, this is Moses that I was just quoting just now.
Yes, you're right, and I'm including Moses in this. Like, I believe this is ritual, and in the text, like Adam, as I understand it, is just the word for person.
Sorry, I should be more clear. I thought that the book of, maybe I'm exposing my ignorance here. I thought the book of Moses we were like more happy about compared to the book of Abraham.
Well, I'm not picking or choosing. I'm just saying that. In fact, I'm not even talking about legitimacy or easiness to explain to
I'm
a
happy
skeptic
about
or
them
anything.
both. I'm
from
our last
I love them
translation
both, but
episode.
my point is that all of these really feel like rituals, right? These are all enacting a sacred drama. This is Joseph Campbell stuff, and I really, and the words, like I was saying, Adam just means person essentially, and you could read the text as saying both the man and the woman were named Adam, as if they are simply people. And so the purpose of the story, more than being good history, is to teach us something through metaphor, to teach us something through metaphor that allows us to understand our relationship with God. And so while I am prone to believe that Adam and Eve are real people, I'm not really prone to take the fall as something that has to be super literal. There was a fruit, and then all of a sudden everything was different. It could be. Like, I don't have a problem with that being true, but I don't think the scriptures insist on it being true.
If Adam had, I'm quoting from 2 Nephi, chapter 2, 22.
Yes.
All right? From the Book of Mormon. Remember, we do have some members, some listeners that are not
oh, I'm sure I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are really mad at me right now, and that's okay. That's all right.
If Adam
I'm willing to be wrong.
If Adam had not transgressed, he would not have fallen, but he would have remained in the Garden of Eden. And all things which were created must have remained in the same state in which they were after they were created, and they must have remained forever and had no end. Right? Again, this concept of this stasis, that the Garden of Eden was in a stasis, right? No death, paradisiacal,
like animals,
right? And
because animals are
without all the eating of each other, right? And then and if they hadn't, and this is a particularly Mormon point of view, by the way, that the fall of Adam and Eve is actually a really good thing.
Right, yeah.
I was going to bring it up that we wanted to make sure people understood the difference here between LDS doctrine and mainstream Christian doctrine, if I can use the word mainstream.
There are different versions, but generally speaking, we are a bit unusual in thinking the fall was...
We're really happy about it.
Yeah.
We are happy about it. We celebrate Eve's role in it.
Yeah.
So
she's a hero in our world.
She's a hero. We needed the fall so that we could leave the garden and, learn the good and evil, the difference between them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that's really cool. I think that's fabulous. It's one of the things that I really enjoy about being in our church. In fact, when I was in college, we read Perelandra. Have you ever read Perelandra?
No, I don't think so.
That's a C.S. Lewis book.
Oh, I read the first one.
The Mars trilogy.
Is that the first one?
Yeah, it's the second one. Perelandra is the
I have
second
not read
one.
the second one. I have the trilogy, but I only read
the first one. The space,
because I don't remember anything.
The space person goes to Mars and has some encounters. And the second one, he goes to.
Ooh, there's a lot of nudity.
I don't remember. I actually don't think I've read the first one. I've only actually read the second one. So this one, he goes to Venus, and Venus in this story is a non-fallen Earth.
Okay.
Right, and the conclusion of the book is that if in this version of the creation story they didn't fall. And C.S. Lewis said that because of this, that they got more and more, their futures were brighter and farther than ours were coming from the fallen world.
Interesting.
It's a completely different understanding of the role of Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah,
it's a viewing of Adam and Eve as people that made a mistake, as opposed to part of the essential plan, which is what we believe in.
Yeah.
And we don't. So when we would look at Perelandra and say, well, no, if they don't fall, then they're stuck there, and they'll never leave.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Okay, but so we have this.
Well, that's why I think evolution fits in so nicely with LDS doctrine. We start as nothing, and we work our way forward. To me, the problem with evolution is not your question, like how do we reconcile the idea of death existing before Adam and Eve. I don't really have a problem with that because, for reasons I explained, I don't think we're required to take that story super literally. But my issue, and this is not, it doesn't trouble me that much, I just don't know how to explain it, is at what point in speciation did we become human enough to be responsible, to be capable of committing sin? And it doesn't seem possible that could have been two people, but I'm really attached to the idea of Adam and Eve as people, as individuals, because I really care about those two people. I love them very much. They're two of my very favorite historical characters, quasi-historical characters, and I want them to be real people. We believe they have identities in, outside of their time on Earth, and I really want them to be real people, but the problem is, in terms of, from a scientific standpoint, you don't just have two people suddenly be humans, right? It's something that would take time. And so in a way, it would be easier if we believe that Adam and Eve are a stand-in for, the group of humans that over a 100,000-year period achieved consciousness or something, right? Or achieved enough moral capacity to be human and therefore to fall. Because that's what seems logic to me, because I don't think we can reject evolution as false. I think that's foolish and a lie and not a good way to go. But I don't know, where's that boundary? I think we have the same question here, but... Yeah,
let's be specific. Now we're talking about the origin
we
of
are,
mankind.
which I know you don't want to go to.
No, now's the time.
Now's the time. Oh, good, because I just did it.
So, yes, if you look at all of everything around us, right? Mm-hmm. Just as you could say that everything around you testifies that there is a God.
Yes.
You could look around you and everything around you testifies of evolution, right?
Right. Alma's little claim is not particularly convincing unless, yeah.
So you look around and you just see these records, right? You see common ancestors.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
There's a brilliant segment in one of the episodes of QI, quite interesting, which is a British trivia show, where Sandy Toxvie
you talked to me about
is talking about evolution, specifically about the ascent of man.
Okay.
Picture. Can you picture
that in
your hand?
Is that
in your mind?
The Michelangelo?
No, it's the one of the monkeys getting taller and taller until you have the guy with the spear.
Yeah,
right.
And then they start.
Sandy said that there was two problems with that picture. Okay. And they talk about it on the show for a while. The first one is that it misses the point in the terms of that's not how it works. It's more like there's common ancestors as opposed to a single line of ascent.
It's like when people are drawing their ancestry backward and it looks like a straight line back to the beginning. But if everybody had a straight line going backwards, there would be more people in the past than in the present.
That's right. The other problem with that picture is that there's no women in it.
That's fair point. I've seen a lot of variations of that image. I'm not sure I've ever seen one with women.
Yeah.
I've seen so many variations.
So we've got this chain of non-human, as in Homo sapien, ancestors or common ancestors that connect us to the past, right? And that we, based on the evidence, we as a species, that's where we came from. Yeah. As opposed to a de facto, like, pop, there's someone where there wasn't anyone. That's what the evidence shows, right? Yeah. So, what's really going on?
Can I take a slight tangent that will meet our requirement to pitch another dialogue podcast family podcast?
Yeah, do it.
It's a pretty tangential tangent, but Beyond the Block's most recent episode, What God Hath Cleansed, talks about in Acts where Peter has the vision of eating the unclean things and it's okay because God said so. Don't call unclean what God has said is clean. And they apply it to marginalized communities. We can think of communities in the church who have not been allowed the priesthood, communities who have had policies directed directly at them in recent history. We have plenty of examples. There could be something similar happening here, right? Like maybe God by fiat is involved somehow in drawing lines.
Can you be more clear?
Probably not. But what I mean is, the problem is, as you say, this is an incredibly complex and messy story. It is a story with death smeared all over it. And it's hard to see God's hand in chaos. That's not the way we think about God.
This is one of the critical points I wanted to make. Okay? When I have seen in my life people not believing with scientists, right? Yeah. Like I've seen a lot of disrespect paid towards science throughout the Christian community, right? Mm-hmm. And even within people that I know that are LDS, just a bit of a sense of disdain that scientists are always wrong about everything. Yeah, and it just drives me crazy. Okay, but I think part of it might come a bit from the sense of randomness, this disbelief in randomness. Yeah. Right? Everybody understands that if you roll dice a bunch of times, that you're going to get random numbers, right? But they always think, okay, well, actually, if you just knew how the wind was going that day, you'd be able to figure it out, right?
Yeah, that belief in there's a way to perfectly predict something.
Yeah, but there's this rejection of real randomness, which, if you dig down into the laws of quantum mechanics, that's really what's going on, is that there appears to be this randomness. This is what Einstein, his famous quote, right? God does not play dice with the universe. I'm going to put an article in the notes that talks about this quote, because it's really misunderstood. God does not play dice with the universe wasn't a rejection of the science. He didn't actually believe in God. He was just trying to understand how it could be possible that you could have real randomness in a world of mathematics where everything seems to be so ordered.
Poor classical physics.
I'm hoping that I'm explaining his point of view correctly. So randomness seems to go so against creationism, okay? Because in some ways, creationism is a rejection of randomness. Yeah. Right? I'm going to make order out of chaos. Right? I just quoted...
or out of nothing, even more so. There never was chaos in some worldviews.
Right. And yet, that's actually not what we believe in our church. we don't believe that God created the world out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that God organized the world from something. And I think that is the real difference here, all right? That allows you to kind of embrace the randomness of the world and the reality of religion, is this acceptance of the physical world that we actually live in. Our church believes that God is bound by laws.
Yeah.
Okay? When you read in the scriptures and it says that if you obey the commandments, that God is bound to do these things, right? That's a very interesting way to put it, right?
Yeah.
We also, people talk about God being all powerful.
Well, the
right?
God fantasy is about
omniscience.
Do whatever I want.
Call back to first season. Omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence.
Red ball stuff.
Right? Red ball stuff. In reality, God is bound by laws.
Yeah.
All right? And I would assume that if one of the fundamental... This is interesting. I had never thought of this way before. If one of the fundamental laws of the universe is randomness, then in some ways you could argue that God would be bound by that randomness too.
Seems reasonable. Maybe hubristic to command God to be subject to randomness, but we can only deal with what we know. Right?
Yeah, anyway. That was a bit more obscure thinky than maybe I'm comfortable with.
No, that's okay. I think there's another really Latter-day Saint issue at play here. When I was in high school, trying to understand how prophecy could work and free agency could work, I came up with this idea of God having a perfect sense of probability, which is what you were talking about. Like, if I just knew how to hold the die, and if I understood the surface of the table perfectly, I could roll it and get a 6 every single time.
Lieutenant Commander Data. That's what he does.
Yeah. Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Good for him. But the more I think about it, the more I realize, like, this perfect idea of probability, it just doesn't meld with the idea of free agency. Like, free agency requires that God allows for the world to have chaos in it. And because humans, I think it would be fair to say, are inherently chaotic. You can do a pretty good job predicting what a population will do, but on the individual level, we're as nutty as quarks. We're as or any particle. I don't know. I'm moving outside my bound of knowledge here, but there's chaos at that fundamental level of matter, and I think the same thing is true of human society. At the fundamental level of society, at the individual human, there is chaos.
I think that it's interesting because let's go back to one topic that we had discussed a while back, which was entropy, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the amazing things about Christianity is, the resurrection and essentially the reversal of entropy.
Right.
In some ways, it's really the victory over randomness.
Arguably, yeah, sure.
Yeah, maybe there's really something interesting to think about with God and randomness that is ability to overcome it, perhaps. I don't really know where to go with that. Let's go back to evolution.
Okay.
There have been 3 public statements from the first presidency.
Okay.
On evolution.
Yeah.
And 1 private statement.
It's been a while since we've had one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Long time.
Long time.
Yeah.
All right.
I intentionally did not look at these because I wanted to be able to... although I've read them before multiple times, if there was stuff I'd forgotten, I wanted to be able to react.
So, the 1909 statement, 1909, on the origin of man, okay, because it was just... so, just looking here at Wikipedia again, the Latter-day Saints were in the Western Plains when Origin of Species was published by Charles Darwin, so it took a while for it to percolate over, right? There was a few small responses to it, but it kind of feels like nobody really paid attention at first. It was in the early 1909s we began to respond. So there was a committee appointed by Joseph F. Smith to look into it and prepare official statement, basing its belief on divine revelation, ancient and modern, proclaiming man to be the direct and lineal offspring of deity. All right?
Yeah.
The statement declares human evolution as one of the theories of men, but falls short of explicitly declaring it untrue or evil. It states that man began life as a human being in the likeness of our Heavenly Father. it states that although man begins life as a germ or embryo, it does not mean that Adam began life as anything less than a man, or less than the human germ or embryo that becomes a man. And it was assigned by the signatures of the first presidency. Right?
Yeah.
So then there was a controversy in BYU in 1911.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this?
Yeah, again, it's been a while.
The Brigham Young modernism controversy. So this happened.
Fun way to
this
call
happened in 1911. All right. So can you summarize it? How much do you know about it?
It's been a very long time since I read about it. But basically, the science and theology were at each other's throats to some extent.
This was before the Scopes monkey trial, if I have my dates right. And if you don't know what the Scopes monkey trial is, go watch Drunk History on Hulu, the Scope monkey trial episode.
You're just encouraging them.
Perhaps. Look, I love that show. Whether or not I should, I don't know, but I do. Anyway, and that was the trial where they essentially staged and put evolution on trial, right?
Yes.
Okay, but in 19... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's include in the notes a link to the book that I was required to read as part of my BYU freshman level biology course about the Scopes monkey trial.
Okay, good.
It's a good book, and it's a really important moment in history.
Yeah, I think it might be one of the turning points that you had said about this rejection of science and this evangelical thinking.
Yeah.
So
it was a big embarrassment for creationism.
So we have a bit of basketball happening above us.
Yeah.
Okay. So all right. Well, we'll keep going. The 1911, there were these 4 professors in BYU who taught evolution, right?
Yeah.
And they taught some criticism of the Bible, right? And they were, well, I mean, could you just say they were fired, I guess?
If they no longer worked at BYU the next year, I would say you could say they were fired.
The courses that they taught were popular, right? But they were given a choice, right? Alter their teachings or lose their jobs.
Oh no!
Yeah,
people's integrity is on the line, Aaron.
So they left.
Yeah.
Right. And then there was another thing that happened in 1915 at University of Utah, similar kind of thing. All right. Milton Bennion, writing in 1911, called the conflict the most significant event in Utah's recent educational history. Essentially, it was this rejection of science, right?
Yeah.
At BYU.
And like we talked about, this was
this chilling effect on the teachers.
And it takes time.
It took decades to get over.
I mean, there's still. I assume this is still happening. Definitely, it was happening while I was a student at BYU. There were still students who were shocked, or must have been shocked, because at BYU, when you take a freshman level biology course, they are very gentle with you, and they explain how evolution is real, and it doesn't need to damage your testimony. Look at me. I have a testimony, and I'm teaching you evolution. Like, they're so gentle with it. Which lets me know that, at least as of 20 years ago, this was still a big deal.
Hello, dear listener. I realized at this point in the podcast that we forgot to put in some of the statistics that I was interested in quoting. So, again, this is from Wikipedia, talking about how do Mormons actually feel about evolution. So in a 2014 U.S. religious landscape study, researchers found that 52% of Mormons believe that humans always existed in their present form. 42% believe that humans evolved over time. More specifically, 29% of Mormons believe that evolution is guided by a supreme being, and 11% believe that evolution occurred in natural causes. All right, one more study. 2017, there was a study, Next Mormon Study. 74% responded that they were confident or had faith that God created Adam and Eve in the last 10,000 years, and that Adam and Eve did not evolve from other forms of life. When asked whether evolution was the best explanation for how God brought about life on Earth, 33% of Mormons were confident or had faith that this was not true. And if you look at the Wikipedia article, which I recommend, there's some interesting studies about education level and whether or not you are prone to believe or disbelieve in evolution.
Let's look at some of the statements from the first presidencies.
Okay.
All right. I specifically wanted to quote, in a 1952 speech to students at Brigham Young University, McKay used the theory of evolution as an example while suggesting that science can leave a student with his soul unanchored. He stated that a professor that denies divine agency in creation imposes on the student that life was created by chance. So again, this rejection of randomness. But it's this, when I was reading this, I love President McKay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but this particular quote really, really got to me. Science can leave a student with a soul unanchored.
It's such a false dilemma.
Right.
Like, no.
And this...
Maybe it can, but that's only because they weren't given the tools to think about these things in the first place.
Right. When we were discussing this topic beforehand, you you used the phrase "okay, boomer."
No, I didn't, but I thought it. Oh, last week when we talked about it, you mean? Okay, I may have.
Yeah.
That's entirely possible. I would never say that for recording because, oh my gosh, children these days, they don't. I don't want to talk about it. Like, they have no idea how. Never mind. They don't know what a boomer is. Let's just leave it at that.
They really don't.
They have no idea.
But the point is that there's this generational gap.
Yeah.
Right. I was always told that there was no such thing as a generational gap. And when I look at my kids, okay,
yeah,
I feel roughly the same as I did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Right. They
don't feel the same about you though.
I know they think I'm so old, but I'm not.
Yeah.
But regardless, I really think there's this generational thing where kids these days don't even care about this subject, right?
Yeah, it's not a big deal to them.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Evolution happened.
It's only a big deal if your parents spend a lot of time trying to convince you it's a vicious lie.
Right.
Then it becomes a big deal someday when they learn it isn't.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not a big deal. So I have a book I want to talk about. This is not a book by a Latter-day Saint. It's called Ark Baby. It's by Liz Jensen. She's a British writer. I read this book almost 20 years ago. And I don't remember it very well. But the part I remember best is it's largely a near future book, but it also has some scenes that take place in the past. And there's this preacher in Victorian England, a really great person, true Christian in every way, really admirable, man of great faith. And he's presented with incontrovertible. That also sounds wrong, but I'll take your word for it.
I don't know.
Can't be argued with evidence that evolution is real.
Uh-huh.
And it sets him in a tailspin. He loses his faith entirely. It's completely gone. The thing he's built his entire life on, something he feels deeply, that is core to his identity, he, in a matter of a couple days of mourning, completely abandons it. And that was where the book lost me. I loved that book so much. But I feel that the author had such a deep misunderstanding of what it means to be religious. The idea that one fact is enough to kill God is a real misunderstanding. And it's giving evolution a power it doesn't have. It's already really powerful. You don't need to give it the ability to kill God. Like, that's crazy. And I just don't think that she understands religious people. She doesn't understand that faith can be as complicated and deal with disagreeing evidences in the same way science can, or any other epistemological way of looking at the world. The world is complicated, and a faith that doesn't recognize that isn't a true faith to start with.
So where do we go? How do I get my great question answered?
Well, I'm going to try to take this book without messing up the microphone. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. Like a lot of things, I don't know that I feel like, it doesn't bother me, right? To me, Ark Baby would have been better if the preacher could accept evolution and maintain his faith. It would have been a more honest book. And I guess that's largely a personal bias, in that I don't see that faith is reliant on any particular facts. I think your question's a legitimate one.
Do you think it's a cognitive dissonance? I'm using that word specifically because I dislike it.
Uh-huh.
Okay? I dislike the phrase cognitive dissonance because I feel like it's trying to gentle something that it's essentially saying, there's no such thing as reality.
Yeah, I mean,
because I believe that there's a reality. I have to,
yeah,
right? That's what I experience.
We have a whole episode on accepting reality.
So, how can there be the statement?
I'm going to give you 5 answers and not explain any of them.
All right, good.
So this is from an essay called Crawling Out of the Primordial Soup, A Step Toward the Emergence of an LDS Theology Compatible with Organic Evolution.
Ah, great.
By Stephen L. Peck, a friend of mine, an evolutionary biologist who teaches at BYU today, not in 1911. And this essay is sort of exploring, like, how do you do this? And part of the essay explores 5 suggestions by a University of Copenhagen professor of theology named Niels Gregersen. I'm going to give his 5 reasons without any explanation at all.
Okay.
The reason I'm saying them is just to suggest that there are people who are grappling with this. And for people who need an answer, there are avenues to explore. So, option number 1 from Gregersen, flat religious naturalism.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, evolving theistic naturalism.
Okay, you're saying these words, but they don't make sense.
I know. I am intentionally doing that because I don't want to get into it. Like, this is not about Gregersen. But my point is that Peck is taking each of these and exploring what this would mean from an LDS theological perspective, applying LDS scriptures and LDS thought to these ideas that I am throwing out here with no meaning whatsoever. Like, number 3, atemporal theism.
Okay.
Let's shrug at each other and look at 4, which is temporal theism, which I'd like to suggest is the opposite of atemporal theism,
or at least maybe.
And you'll like this one, number 5. Eschatological. I know this word. Eschatological theism. Those are 5 possibilities, and that's just a small part of this essay, right? And the last section is about the history of Mormon theological speculation. It quotes like B.H. Roberts. It gets to ideas like what is the importance of design in Mormon theology, teleology, which is a word I can never remember no matter how many times I look up. I will always forget it. I have a lot of notes to myself on this because it's a very thought-provoking essay. My point isn't to go through what Steve has written about here. My point is to suggest that complicated questions have complicated answers.
Can you do one of them?
How about instead of one of the explanations, I muddy the water a little bit more using the essay?
Okay.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, you bet.
So, under the section called Mormon Evolutionary Theology, it gets to 4 points that are speculating on ways to reconcile the intersection between Mormon theology and Darwinian evolution. And the first area in which he tries to do this is the idea of natural evil. So, a lot of Mormon apologists have the opinion that LDS theology solves the classic problem of evil, right? It's not God's fault anymore. Evil is just, it's because of the chaos of the universe. There's no ex nihilo creation, etc. Joseph Smith has solved this problem because God is subject to natural laws. The world is created out of materials that have their own principles, and so God is no longer at fault if a bad thing happens to you.
Huh, okay.
So that's a common argument among Mormon apologists. Now, the good thing, bad thing here is that makes evolution fine, right? It's the natural law. It's how God does things. It's the only way it works. It is problematic, of course, because evolution is very cruel. It's a cruel way. It takes 4 billion years to get to people, and a lot of things have to die on the way.
Yeah. There's a lot of dead ends.
Yeah, so many dead ends. And so
it seems inefficient.
And it's super inefficient. Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially because one of the principal tenets of our church, we talked about last week, is this ascension, this exaltation, right? Where we can become creators like unto our Father, right?
Yeah.
And they teach you when you hear about this, you start to speculate, right? Okay, I'm going to go to class and I'm going to learn how to create a monkey or a fish, right?
Right.
When in reality, it's random. I mean, what does that even mean? How does God even drive that?
Well, and it also confuses the issue of the pre-existence, because at what point do God's children get to enter a body?
Yeah.
And is that body equivalent to our body, or do they have to enter subpar bodies and then get them up to this shape? Or
to me, I think these are the reasons why you see evolution rejected.
Right. It's way easier to reject it because
Mm-hmm.
these are difficult questions that we do not have the information to solve.
The timeless Eden story, as in no time.
Yeah.
Right? And then a world in which you get to come back to it and create literal life forms.
Yeah.
Is better to think about.
Right.
It's simpler.
It's simpler. I mean, and that is part of the job of Scripture and part of the job of ritual, is to put the world into a shape where it's simpler and we can see the important parts. Because real life is so chaotic and messy that it's easy to lose track of what actually matters.
It's fascinating. I love this topic. I really believe. I hate the phrase, but I really believe in evolution, right? And I find the muddied waters of the evolution of man, again, man and women, from apes, and its contrast with the literal creation of Adam and Eve in the garden, to be very interesting. And even though we've done an hour on the topic, I still don't really feel like we resolved it.
I really hope with this, because I feel like we haven't reached a natural conclusion either, but we're going to conclude anyway.
On some of our shows, I feel like we have reached a conclusion.
Yeah, I really feel like this is one where I really want people's feedback.
Yeah. Listen, one thing that we have said categorically is that evolution happens and is happening.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's a joke to say it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, there's way too much evidence. You have to be deliberately ignorant.
If you're uncomfortable with that statement, and it wouldn't surprise me if there are LDS folks out there that are uncomfortable with that statement, that's something to examine.
Yeah.
To maybe take issue with that part of the conversation first, and then come meet us at where we think we are.
Yeah. Yes, because, and ultimately, like, this question is not that pertinent to your personal salvation, Aaron.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't have to know the answer to this question.
You don't have to listen to Face and Hat either.
No, that's true. and that, I think, is why I don't lose sleep over it, and I don't lose testimony over it.
Yeah.
It's something I'm happy to revisit and to consider, but ultimately, I don't need to know the answer. In the same way, Charles Darwin was wrong about some details. For instance, he was wrong about how fast evolution can happen. And that's okay. He was a scientist. He had to know he didn't have everything right. He had to know that things would get more precise and there would be more knowledge. Every time a movie comes out, not every time. Every once in a while, a movie will come out and be like, oh, poor Gene Siskel, he's dead. And now Roger Ebert's dead too. I used to watch their show when I was a teenager. I'd stay up late on the weekends and watch Siskel and Ebert. They'll never see that movie, right? The world is going to continue after us, and we don't have to solve all the problems today. We don't need all the answers. Because evolution as a biological principle is one thing, but evolution as a theological and an intellectual and an academic principle is another. We're going to continue to grow and improve and learn more and more and more. And we just have to accept that we live in one moment of time, and it's our job to spread our intellectual seed, so to speak, and hope that it germinates into something that will survive better in the future.
I know you want. That sounded like a great conclusion, but I'm not going to give it to you. It was good, but you don't think this is a barrier to entry?
What do you mean?
Just this. Do you think the belief the articles of faith use the word literal at some points, right? The literal gathering of Israel,
I think
right?
one time.
Well, maybe just one time.
Yes.
But the point is that there's these cut and dried statements, right? Do you think these are barriers to entry to the church?
No, because
I have a story. I had a story that goes with this. I remember vividly when I was a kid, and there was this friend of the family who got baptized.
Yeah.
And was discovered after a church meeting, sitting in a hallway, shaking her head, and thinking, saying, I just didn't know that we didn't believe in evolution.
Oh my gosh!
So this was
Were you advanced enough at that time?
This was probably about 30 years ago. I was just a kid, right?
Yeah.
And I heard this story secondhand, right? And but even recently, there has been this idea that we just don't believe in evolution, and so where I want to end the show is this affirmation, right? That evolution is science, and science is has to be a part of your testimony, and this is part of what it means to be a Latter-day Saint. I think in modern times, there's no way around it. Denying it doesn't make any sense at all.
We believe in all truth.
Yeah.
Even if we don't understand how the pieces fit together.
Again, I go back to this being a basic teaching, and why are we even spending time on this show? It's because I really believe that there are people that need to know.
Well, and I believe it is a fundamental command of the faith to explore this stuff and grow in knowledge and understanding. That is what we are supposed to do. It is a slothful servant who just is happy to say evolution isn't real because that's easier. Mm-hmm. That is not Latter-day Saint living, in my opinion. And going back to the Articles of Faith, we yet believe God will yet reveal many great and marvelous things pertaining to the kingdom of God, and everything pertains to the kingdom of God. And although Darwin wasn't a prophet, as we would define him, he definitely brought truth to us. And all truth is God's truth. God knows all this stuff. We can't, if we want to be like him, we can't just ignore stuff because it's inconvenient.
That's really what our guiding philosophy is here, is that we just unceremoniously reject the idea that you can ignore niggling doubts.
Put your face in the hat. That doesn't mean hide from the world. That means look for more information.
That's right.
Yeah.
We are a proud member of the Dialogue Network. Go and listen to their shows.
Yeah, they're probably niggling in much more responsible ways.